Be very afraid. I repeat, be afraid. But of what? We live in a world where fear is everywhere. The news headlines are seemingly dominated by messages of a world falling apart. We fear Donald Trump, we fear Hillary Clinton, we fear Brexit, we fear the European Union, we fear finding love, we fear not finding love, and when we find it, we fear losing it. In short, a world of fear. Yet there is a disconnect between our fears and the cold, hard statistics behind them. Flying is a prime example. How many of you have at some point during your lives been afraid of flying? That's fewer than I thought. But aviation has a reputation of being dangerous in comparison to other modes of transport. But if you look at the cold hard statistics, the likelihood of falling out of the sky is rather small. On the other hand, few of us have probably ever thought twice about getting into a car, although statistically, we're much more likely to die in a car crash than falling out of said sky. Well, let's look at energy. It's hardly the sexiest of topics, I know. It never quite made it as a conversation starter in the pub. But it surrounds us every moment of every day of our lives. Energy is there when we turn on the laptop to pull the all-nighter, to write the essay we just couldn't quite be asked to write. It's there when we turn on the kettle to boil some tea when we're trying to keep warm for saving on the energy bills. But speaking of kettles, there is one particular kettle that is rather controversial. And I speak, of course, about the nuclear one. Because a nuclear reactor, at the end of the day, has but one purpose: boil water to make electricity. Yet we live in a society where nuclear power is feared. It's got a cultural narrative of fear, of death, and of destruction. Yet if we look at the cold, hard statistics behind nuclear power, it is by far the safest mode of energy production. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we got the king of power itself. I speak, of course, about coal. But coal kills tens of thousands of people, lung diseases and due to its waste. But I'm sure, like myself, none of you are lying wide awake at night thinking about a coal-powered energy station. Unless you think about this. You think about the carbon crisis that we are facing, where for hundreds of years, human civilization has been using our atmosphere as a virtual dump. And if any of you believe that climate change is just, to use the Trump sense of the word, an alternative fact, then I hope you brought yourself a good book. What I'm going to say next is, either way, not going to be interesting. But climate change, seldom has two so seemingly simple words been the cause of such debate, such controversy, and judging by the headlines, fear. But climate change also means a lot of very different things depending on who you are. If you call a Pacific island home, well then climate change is something that's going to see your home submerged. If you live in Glasgow, you have my commiserations, it's just more rain for you. But generally, for people in the West, climate change is but another problem on a pile that keeps getting longer. But for me, climate change represents something that's quite different. For me, the science is settled, and I'm not going to contribute on it. Yes, there are debates to be held about how bad it's going to be, where it's going to hit, and when. The climate change nevertheless poses an existential threat to our ways of life. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, because we live in a world that is inherently unsustainable, and inherently unjust. For me, however, nuclear power was not the first solution that came to mind. And like most of you, I think, I had concerns about the accidents, the waste problem, and the weapons. But I started to look into the issue deeper, go beyond the headlines, go beyond what I had been spoon-fed at school. Started to look at these issues and see, why do we actively try not to use an energy source that is not incredibly powerful, but also inherently clean? And what I found surprised me. I found three narratives that was embedded within our society that I saw as the three nuclear myths about the waste, the accidents, and the weapons. And I would like to invite you all on this journey as we look at these issues at hand. And let's start with the elephant in the room, shall we? Accidents. Let's make it simple. Has anyone in this room never heard of Chernobyl? Thought so. Places like Chernobyl and Fukushima hold a near mythical place in our cultures and in our imagination. For me, I thought that Chernobyl was the graveyard of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and a wasteland of a nuclear disaster. But when you start to scratch the surface, there's a very different image that comes across. The number of deaths from the Chernobyl accident is 56. It's not the tens or hundreds of thousands that we've been told it was, but 56. The Fukushima accident in 2011 is never going to cost anyone their lives. That is, not from radiation. But if we put that in a wider context, between 1969 and year 2000, there was almost 2,000 severe energy accidents. 2 of those would be of nuclear nature. These accidents cost more than 80,000 people their lives. Nuclear accidents cost 56 people their lives. So the narrative that we've been fed, that as soon as something goes wrong with a nuclear power station, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die, it simply doesn't hold up to facts. The big killer in a nuclear accident is social stigma. Because of radiation, people are being shunned by society, being told there's something wrong with you because you have been touched by something that we fear. This is very evidently seen at Chernobyl, because when the people were evacuated and placed within other societies, they were shunned. Many took to the bottle and subsequently died from social stress or complications of alcoholism. But then, if accidents aren't the problem, well then, surely the waste is. I mean, the entire notion of having something so dangerous you need to burrow it a kilometre down under the surface of the planet for hundreds of thousands of years, surely this is as unsustainable as anything ever could become. But yet again, if we start to scratch the surface and look at the very facts and set aside prejudices, between 95 and 99% of nuclear waste is nothing but reusable resource. And the remaining 1% that is truly wasteful, that we cannot use in any kind of nuclear reactor, it's not as dangerous as it's been portrayed. And the main danger from nuclear waste would be if somehow terrorist groups got hold of it, built a dirty bomb, blew it up, and the social stigma history would start all over again. But if then waste isn't the problem, then surely the bombs are. Because, I mean, no one wants bomb factories virtually around every corner. But if you want to build nuclear weapons, the worst way to do so is to use a nuclear reactor. It is the most complicated, it's the most expensive, and the odds are, if you're going to try to build a nuclear bomb, you're going to want to do so in secrecy. By using a civilian nuclear reactor, you could just as well put up a sign on the sky saying, I'm building a bomb, don't look here. So then, for me, when it became so clear that what I thought to be the big problems weren't problems, I started my research on radiation and radiation fear. Because radiation holds, like the accident, a mythical place in the way we see nuclear. That radiation somehow is more dangerous than any other environmental risk. But the thing is that radiation surrounds us every moment of our lives. At the moment, you're being bombarded by the walls, by space, by the core, and actually from your very bones. We all radiate a lot. And if our bodies hadn't evolved, or if life hadn't evolved over billions of years to handle a high radiation environment, then we'd all be gone. Yet we aren't falling off, being dead because of radiation. But then you might say, oh, fine, but do we even need it? Surely the headlines about renewables being run on 100% of a country's energy needs are ample examples of that we don't need nuclear power, so why even bother? However, when you scratch the surface, yet again, there's a very different image. The graphs behind me, this is Denmark. The brown section is biomass, coal, and gas. The purple one is wind power, but the wind doesn't always blow, regardless of where you are. And storing things in batteries, we've been trying to do that for 100 years. We are not close to something that's commercially viable and something that's sustainable for society, i.e. cost. And this map of Europe makes it probably even clearer. The greener you are, less CO2. The darker you are, the more. And with the exception of Norway, the greenest countries are the ones that have a high degree of reliability on nuclear on nuclear power, and the darker, obviously. So, but then Germany, the poster boy of the renewables revolution, surely they are doing well. They got rid of their nuclear, getting rid of it, and replacing renewables. The facts aren't there. The claims that they have gone cleaner is simply not there. They have gone down in nuclear, they have built more renewables, but as the graph highlights, the CO2 intensity in the electricity hasn't changed a bit. And, by the way, this is the true face of the German energy revolution. Because renewables, when you can't use them, the Germans have thought, let's plug the gaps with brown coal. And this is what it looks like. So we live in a period of a sustainable energy crisis. Whilst low carbon has increased, solar and wind are still incredibly small. And this is despite the fact we've been plowed in billions and billions of pounds into these projects. But given that we have removed so much nuclear off the grid because we fear what is basically a tea kettle, the amount of renewable or low-carbon energy has declined in real terms. And 4.5% doesn't sound like a lot, but that is 60 nuclear power stations or 900 solar farms. So the scope of the challenge at hand is immense. And if we say, okay, I fear this power station, but the facts aren't there, then we are, at effect, failing not only to build a carbon-free society, but also making it more sustainable. And one of the key problems with nuclear fear isn't just what we do in the West, but the way how we approach nuclear power around the world. Because we fear that a nuclear reactor would be used as a means of proliferation, of bomb making, we are saying to the so-called developing world, or really the rest of the world, that we don't think you're quite up to the challenge. We don't think that you can handle a reactor. We don't think you can safeguard it. We don't think you can run it adequately. But if you look at, once again, the statistics behind it, not a single country has ever built civilian nuclear power and then built bombs. It was always the other way around. By denying the rest of the world access to nuclear power, we are not only ensuring that the climate crisis is virtually unsolvable, renewables are the best friends of one type of energy, and that is anything that is based on carbon. Because as renewables have gone up, emissions are still at a very high level. But it's not only about the carbon crisis, it's also the fact that more than 1 billion people around the world do not have access to any kind of electricity. By telling them, sorry, you're not quite good enough to use nuclear power, we are condemning them to burning their rainforests, burning their own oil, their coal, or as millions of people do, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, but around the world generally, burn cow shit. We live in 2017. How is this morally justifiable? Because at the end of the day, as Professor Rosling said, in the West we have a responsibility to the rest of the world to share what we would have done and not force them to redo everything all over again. And nuclear power gives us the opportunity to build a very different kind of society, a different kind of world altogether. A clean world where everyone could have access to high energy lifestyle, like in the West, but sustainable. Nuclear power has the potential to truly revolutionize the world we live in. I say, let's take the challenge. Thank you.